Hello, my name's Justin Porter, and today's date is the 27th of December, and the title of my video is The Inquisition and Judicial Committees. Now, I just watched a fascinating documentary called The Complete Bloody History of the Inquisition. I repeat that. The documentary I watched 3 hours long, but fascinating, 3 hours. If you're an ex-Jehovah's Witness or a current Jehovah's Witness, watch this documentary. It's called The Complete Bloody History of the Catholic Inquisition. And when I watched this documentary, I couldn't help thinking about Jehovah's Witness judicial committees when it comes to how they deal with apostates. How the judicial committees of Jehovah's Witnesses, 3 elders, how they deal with apostates. Now, I have never been on a judicial committee. I have never been on a judicial committee. I was Jehovah's Witness for basically 22 years active, door to door, but 30 brainwashed, believing I was, Now, usually the judicial committees for apostasy, one of the main things that they'll bring a phone into the judicial committee and record it. They'll record it. The apostate will record the judicial committee and post it on YouTube. But one of the main reasons is that problems with the governing body. If the main thing is, if you commit a sin, you go to Jesus for confession. Now, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in God. But if you commit a sin, you go to Jesus, you confess to Jesus. You don't have to confess to the governing body. Now, the Catholic Inquisition lasted about 600 years. 600 years the Catholic Inquisition lasted, and it was in Europe, Italy, France, England, European, and the major gripe where people were brought before the Inquisition was, I shouldn't have to confess my sins to a Catholic priest. I confess my sins to Jesus. I confess my sins to Jesus. He speaks to the Father. Now, this documentary that I watched, as I said, it's called The Complete Bloody History of the Catholic Inquisition. If you don't want to spend 3 hours watching it, there's other YouTube videos on the Inquisition. But this documentary starts in the year 1308. Now, in the year 1308, in Europe, there was these priests that would travel around the countryside, and their main message was, you don't have to confess your sins to a priest. You just confess your sins to Jesus. The message that they preach, you don't have to confess your sins to a priest in a confessional. You just have to confess your sins to Jesus, And for this, the Catholic Church rounded up these priests, and they were called Cathars. They were called Cathars, right? That was the name of these, and Waldenses also. Cathars and Waldenses. And in 1308, they were arrested and put in an Inquisition. Now, even if they said, I'm sorry, I won't do it again, no, they got burned at the stake. They got burned at the stake for going around preaching to peasants and a lot of people. And whole villages where they preached, these Cathars preached in, whole villages were arrested by soldiers in 1308. They were arrested by soldiers and taken to courts, and they were tortured for confessions, and if they denied it or anything like that, they were let go. But if they were suspected of being a heretic, now heretic is different than apostate. Apostate is somebody who changes their religion. A heretic is somebody who questions certain parts of religion. And if they were found guilty, they were burned at the stake. Or if they apologised, say, look, I was misled by the Cathar priests, I now believe I have to go to the priest to confess my sins, not just to Jesus. They would usually be put under house arrest, or wear a yellow hat with a big yellow cross on it, and be publicly shamed in the community as a heretic. But they would be publicly shamed, but they repented, they came forward, they weren't the main instigators of the heresy, yeah? They were publicly shamed by wearing a yellow cross and a funny hat, yeah? And that continued into the 1400s, into the 1500s. Now we go into the 1500s, and William Tyndale wrote the Bible in English. He translated the Bible from Latin into English, and the Catholic Church arrested him. Now, it didn't matter how much he apologised for it, but he didn't apologise. So he was burned at the stake. He was burned at the stake in the year 1536. So in the year 1536, William Tyndale was burned at the stake, and he said a ploughboy in the working in the field should be able to read the Bible in his own language, English. And that's around the time when the printing press came out and everything like that. Now, in that century, in the 15th century, where the printing press came out, any books that were deemed as heresy, like the biggest heresy was saying, you don't have to go to the priest to confess your sins. You don't have to go to the governing body to confess your sins. You just confess your sins to Jesus, right? Now, that was the biggest heresy that was going on. And also indulgences. If you died, if your family member died, if you paid the Catholic priest a certain amount of money, they would pray for you so your loved one wouldn't spend so much time in purgatory. You see, that was called indulgences. So if your family member died and you'd pay the Catholic priest a certain amount of money, they would pray for your dead loved one so they wouldn't spend too much time in purgatory. Purgatory is like between heaven and hell. Now, the burnings and the burning of heretics, it's called the Holy Inquisition. The Holy Inquisition went throughout the 1600s into the 1700s. And I think even in America, even in the United States, I think the last witch was burned at the stake in the year 1712. So the last witch to be burned in the United States was in the year 1712 for witchcraft, you know. And then you had the Age of Enlightenment, about 1755. There was a big earthquake, and people worked out on that day in Lisbon, Portugal. A lot of people were in church on the 1st of November in the year 1755, when Portugal was hit by a gigantic earthquake, 8.5 on the Richter scale. Everyone that went into church was killed because the church has collapsed and caught fire because of the candles, and the inside of the church was made out of wood. And then a lot of survivors who didn't go to church ran down to the coast, and a big tsunami wave came in. The ocean went out. They saw shipwrecks. Oh, shipwreck. Let's run out and see this shipwreck that sunk donkeys years ago, and the big wave came and killed them, you know. And then a guy called Voltaire, he worked out that, hey, this isn't God's punishment, because all in church, why would God punish people for being in church? But this is an earthquake caused by a natural occurrence, not by a supernatural occurrence. So that kind of started the Age of Enlightenment. That big earthquake 8.5 on the Richter scale in Lisbon, Portugal in 1755, started the Age of Enlightenment, where they thought, look, it's not a supernatural cause, the earthquake. This is a natural cause, friction, and they investigated it and looked, basically the beginning of seismology, the study of earthquakes. But it's very interesting. We go to the 1800s, and in the Catholic Church still had the Inquisition in the 1800s. In Italy, any books that shared a different religious view. In Europe, you're allowed to be one religion, and that was Catholic. And a lot of Protestants were burned at the stake. And if you remember in the year 1517, Luther nails something to a church door complaining about you don't have to confess your sins to a priest, just confess them to Jesus. And the indulgences. You don't have to pay money to a priest to say prayers to your loved ones so they don't spend so much time in purgatory. But in the year 1858, in Italy, a 12-year-old boy was abducted by a Catholic Pope, and because the Catholic Pope said he is a Christian. Now, in Italy in the 1850s, all Jewish people had to convert to Catholicism or leave Italy. So Jewish people who believed in the Torah, and they were Jews, either you convert to Christianity or you do not stay in Italy. If you want to live in Italy, you convert to Christianity. If you're not going to convert to Christianity, we'll put you in a ghetto and send you back to your country where you can practice your religion. So this 12-year-old boy got sick, right, to the point of death. And a Catholic nurse, a Catholic woman nurse, came around, found out this boy was dying, and he was a Jewish boy, he wasn't a Christian boy, and she prayed over him and baptized him. Sick in bed, she baptized him with water, right, so he wouldn't go to hell, and he became a Catholic. And the father couldn't work out, why have you taken my son to the Vatican? And the boy, and the Pope was Pope Pius IX. Now, Pope Pius IX was born in the year 1792, and he died in the year 1878 at the age of 86. Now, this 12-year-old boy went to the Vatican in Italy, in Rome, and lived with the Pope Pius IX, and became a Christian. And the father of the Jewish boy tracked his son down, and the Pope said, you can visit your son, but your son is a baptized Christian. He got baptized when he was in his sickbed by a Catholic nurse nun. She baptized him behind your back. And the boy fell in love with the Pope Pius IX and became a Christian. And then in the year 1870 is a very special year, because 1870 is the official end of the Catholic Inquisition. They weren't burning people at the stake in the 1800s. No, they weren't burning people at the stake in the 1800s, right? That had stopped. But the Catholic Church still had an iron-like grip. One religion in Italy, and it was the truth. The true religion is the Catholic religion. That's the truth, right? And the father went to get his son, who was 24 years old. He was 24 years old in 1870, born in 1846. And he was a priest. He became a Catholic priest. And he didn't want to go back with his Jewish father. Even when he was 12, he said, no, I'm happy to stay in the Vatican with the Pope. I'd rather stay with the Pope than with my Jewish father. So he became a priest, and he died around, I think he died in about the 1920s in a monastery as a Catholic. This was the 12-year-old boy that got abducted by the Catholic Church because the nurse baptised him without the father's consent, because the Catholic nurse, didn't want the boy to burn in hell for being Jewish and not being a Christian, and a Catholic Christian at that. Why is this so similar to the Jehovah's Witness Judicial Committee? Well, in a Judicial Committee, right, if you are accused of apostasy, right, you may say something like, look, I don't believe the governing body should come between my relationship with Jesus and Jehovah, right? If I commit sins, it's between me and Jesus and Jehovah, right? I don't need you guys to be the go-between between God and man. Jesus is the go-between between God and man. You would be disfellowshipped for apostasy, right? And that's one of the most common, when I watch a lot of YouTube videos on judicial committees where they take their mobile phone into the judicial committee and record it, the main thing is the governing body, 9 guys, you shouldn't have to confess your sins to elders. You confess your sins to Jesus. And the governing body standing in place of Jesus, right? The Catholic priests standing in place of Jesus. Now, as I said, I'm an atheist. It doesn't really bother, but that's all I wanted to say. But watch the documentary. It's called The Complete Bloody History of the Catholic Inquisition. Goes for 3 hours, but as I said, if you're a Jehovah's Witness or an ex-Jehovah's Witness, it's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. And if you don't want to watch a 3-hour video, just YouTube Inquisition, and they're so much like judicial committees, and the punishments were the worst punishment was being burned at the stake. That was you'd be burned, tied to a post, and they'd put branches around, you'd be burned to the stake. The other punishment was home detention, right? And then the other one was you'd be publicly shamed by having to wear a silly yellow hat with a cross on it, like as a heretic, and publicly shamed. And you would lose your family, and that wouldn't, and all this, like Jehovah's Witnesses. And Jehovah's Witnesses, they disfellowship you, which is like death. And they publicly shame you, which is public reproof, just like the Inquisition does. And there's so much like the Inquisition. And in 947, there was a watchtower bagging out the Catholic Church about excommunicating people, or in other words, disfellowshipping people. And then the Jehovah's Witnesses started to disfellowship people in 1952. So the year 1952, they started to disfellowship people. So similar. What they backed out the Catholic Church for, they're doing. The Inquisition of the 12th century and onward into the 1800s, right? They weren't burning people at the stake in the 1800s, but the Inquisition was still there. There were banned books you couldn't read. Books that, in the 1800s, in Catholic countries, you get arrested for certain books if you printed them, They wouldn't burn you at the stake, though. So this is very similar to judicial committees for apostasy. The Inquisition. So just watch it, and if you're a Jehovah's Witness, you'll think, it's like Inquisition. And as a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses, I never knew about judicial committees, and I never used to confess my sins to elders. I never did. It always bothered me. I was a closet alcoholic, and I thought, I'm not going to go to the elders. Jesus knows I'm drinking too much alcohol. He'll sort it out between him and Jehovah. I'm not going to go to men. Like, why are they so special? they're taking the place of Jesus. As I said, I'm an atheist, agnostic. I'm an agnostic atheist, so I'm not a Christian. But it's just very interesting how the governing body is standing in place of Jesus, just like the Catholic popes of centuries past stood in place of where Jesus was, you know. And that's all I want to say. And watch it, like, subscribe. And as I said before, the shunning stops when the videos stop. Sorry, the videos stop when the shunning stops. Thanks again for watching my video. Bye.